Well, I guess we're on. Hello people, I've been off for a couple of weeks and this will be unfortunately the last of my streams for 2022. You can imagine that next week we have a Christmas social appointment. Week after that is the Saturday is Christmas Eve, and the week after that is New Year's Eve, and I somehow think we're going to be doing something other than streaming at that time. So the next session after this one will be the 7th of January 2023. I'll take the opportunity of wishing all viewers all the best for 2023. From our point of view, it's got to be better than 2022, which started with a lockdown and has finished with my wife needing a major surgical operation for hip so that she can walk again. That's been one of the reasons that I've been on YouTube live streams so often, because we've been housebound, but that may change in the next year, in which case I'll still have these live streams, but they'll have more original video content from ham social outings that I can access. Anyway, this is VK3AML. I'm just checking to see that we do have a stream. I haven't seen anything indicating that we don't. Content. Is there going to be a stream coming up? Looks like we've got one. Sorry to go through all of this, but oh God, wouldn't you know it? They skip ads. Hello folks, Chris VK3AML again. No, I can't get that. I'm just hoping that I have a stream. If I hit live, maybe that'll bring up something. No. I have an indication that I'm streaming, but I don't know whether I am at all. So I'll carry on as if I am. With this system, you really are looking. Turn that down. You really are looking down a long tunnel of nasty possibilities. The mixer, the second computer, the webcam, there are two of them, the lighting, the monitor off air. There are so many things that can go wrong. It makes ham radio look like a doddle. Anyway, tonight, an experiment with a camera, a webcam, on top of a squid pole. Webcams are very light and can get onto squid poles very easily, so if you want to have a look at your antenna without having to climb up there, they can be a convenient dodge. Then the major event of the evening, QRP by the Bay, was held by VK3YE Peter Parker last week, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to stream that. And there's all indications that I do have a stream, but I cannot actually detect it. I got the 3rd of December and I've got no stream detectable on my channel, which is odd. So I call up the channel, 10th of December, and I click on that, and let's see what we've got. Close. Ah, good. I should explain that the QRP, the software that's being used for all of this, has been modified in recent weeks not to work the original way that was so easy. And thank you to Ken Cook, John Young, Tom George, 3FTJS, and Van Dan Escobar. Okay, back to the list of items. I'll now go on the air. Hello, this is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the regular Saturday night test transmission. I'll just switch off all of those level controls. Tonight, variety of items. First of all, experiments with a webcam on top of a squid pole, which had some rather interesting results. Last week's QRP by the Bay, organised by Peter Parker, VK3AML. Then a history of a New Zealand success story, TAIT Electronics. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the TAIT radios. We'll have a short history, 10-minute history of the TAIT company. Largely the work of one man in the initial instance. Then a history of ICOM UK, which has gone well past its 50 years. And then as a special for this final stream for this year, 2 films of Melbourne, for those who are interested, taken in the 1920s. One is a film of doubtful origin. Certainly it was a 16mm print, therefore a home movie of some kind, but seems to have been very professionally shot, and I've had 2 stories on how it was shot. One is that they had a projectionist course at RMIT, which was then called the Workingmen's College, and that the film was shot as part of that course. That's a story that I doubt, but it came from Sid Williams back in the 70s when I first saw the film. And the other is that it was the product of an Adelaide amateur filmmaker who was in some way tied up with the Kodak outlet for Adelaide and wanted to demonstrate the quality of the new 16mm home movies. And the film, as far as we've been able to date, was shot in the streets of Melbourne somewhere between the end of 1926 and the end of 1927. So it's 95 years old. And following that, we have some more home movies of Melbourne taken in 1929 by Robert JUCKERT, born 1904, died 1938. As you observe, 34 years old when he died, a short life, but one full of incident. He was an X-ray technician, the chief X-ray technician at St Vincent's Hospital, and consequently he was very familiar with photographic processes and the processing of film, which he probably did himself very well, I might add. So that's just as a sort of a treat for Christmas. We're deviating a little bit off the subject of ham radio, but they may be of interest to people who have an interest in the history of this town of ours, Melbourne. First of all, let's go to roof cam, as I call it. It struck me that we would be able to put a webcam onto a squid pole. So I did just that. I put it on a 9-metre squid pole here on the evening of the 20th of November. And this is a view of our roof. The roof was in the course of being sprayed to get rid of the existing coating for a coating process, and this was the official reason that I was putting the squid pole with the webcam up on the roof to check it before and after. This is after the high pressure spraying of our roof to get rid of the existing coating, which had been up there for about 20 years. That's looking north from our place. You can see Mrs. next door doing a little bit of weeding and watering there, and somebody running up a bike path that runs at the back of our place. We back onto a what's called the Mitcham to Sindel Pipe Reserve. The water main that's been underneath that reserve was put in by Sir John Monash's workers in 1927, and that has been a reserve ever since. Very convenient place, I might add, to hide ground radials under fence lines for a considerable distance, as you might imagine. But to the right in the distance you can see some pine trees, some dark trees there in the reserve. There's me having a look up at the roof cam. We weren't far above the roof at this stage. I extended, this is with the squid pole unextended, and you'll see what happened when we tried to extend it later on. We had a few accidents. Almost lost a webcam out of it, but not quite. This is VK3AML. If you want to see the video that goes with this, please do Google VK3AML 10 December 2022. That's Google the phrase VK3AML 10 December 2022. Another shot of the bike path out the back of our joint. That's one of our little relaxation sheds out the backyard. Well, about a week later, I arranged the squid pole again. You can see it lying on the ground there. And I've grabbed the webcam. The wire is going in through that louvered window into my computer. And that's the mast, my radio mast through which I'm transmitting at the moment that you're probably looking at. And I was about to gaffer tape the webcam to the squid pole, which you'll see in a moment. There's the squid pole, the whole, I think it's 8 metres of it lying across the backyard. And these webcams are the size of a matchbox and weigh about the same, so they're no load on the end of a squid pole, but trying to hold a squid pole steady at the far end is another matter entirely. So you'll see some dizzying views. I hope you've all eaten and aren't seasick. There we are, sort of taping the squid pole onto the webcam. Well, there's the moon up in the sky. You might catch a view of that. And that's the feed line for my very rough inverted L that's being seen. Our ornamental noxious weed, a prickly pear in the backyard. Okay, raising the squid pole, and you can see, whoop, we're getting it tangled in the antenna. Anyway, when it gets out of being tangled in the antenna, there we go, and in the guy wires, that's my inverted L dangling into my shack window there. And you might imagine that being on top of the squid pole, it's a little bit on the shaky side. Okay, there's the coated roof a week after the previous shot, and you can see that it's in much improved condition, along with our 10 solar panels, which probably will be bumping up to 20 fairly soon. We're almost up to the 5 metre level. Now I have to extend sections of the squid pole. That's why it's shaking about a bit. That's one of that green thing is one of the guys for my mast. And we're getting up a little bit in height. Bang! The squid pole retracted itself, so up we got again. We have a rear fire escape stair, bizarrely made of wood. They want to make sure that they kill anybody that comes out that door. Built in 1966 and therefore pre-code, I might add. And this was close to sunset on, I think, the 20th of November. And I'm at this point trying to extend the squid pole in sections and then give each one a friction fit. As any of you who've operated a squid pole will know, at the end of each section there's a friction fit you have to sort of twist back and forth to hold properly. Either that or use gaffer tape. I saw one vandal who used polyurethane filler inside the squid pole so that it extended all right, but they could never get it down again. I think, there we go. Now, rotating, that's northeast, and that's east. You can just see the Dandenong Ranges slightly overexposed through the trees there. That's our roof, the grey one. Next door neighbour, unrestored. So we're one up on the neighbours in that respect. Not that it's very much of a one-upmanship. But we've had such a wet winter that we thought it was wise to get the roof fixed. Now that's looking southeast towards Highbury Road. As you can see, we've got 66 kV lines three-phase at the top of the poles and 240 volt lines further down, and it's always struck me that it might be catastrophic if the 66 kV ever drops on top of the 240. We can watch all of our equipment flying across the room in flames. Looking north, and that's the pipe reserve out the back. At that stage it hadn't been grass cut. The council sends in, or rather Melbourne Water I think it is, sends in cutters. At this stage I'm trying to extend the squid pole further. We're up near R, and you'll see its frozen frame. It's actually looking distantly at One Tree Hill in the Dandenongs. Froze frame because the USB cord fell out. Now we're back again, looking south along the pipe reserve at the back of our place. And at sundown this tends to be a place that's frequented by dog walkers and bicycle riders. It's a convenient thoroughfare for anybody on a bike that wants to avoid major roads, and extends all the way really from Mitcham Reservoir at the north to Sindel Railway Station at the south, about 5 or 6 kilometres. The idea that Sir John Monash had was to put water main gravity fed from Mitcham Reservoir, which is the high point to the north of us, and this ridge that I'm on next to this pipe gravity feeds the Dandenong Creek Valley on the left, and it gravity feeds the Gardeners Creek Valley on the right. So it's a clever gravity feed system with the water main underneath the grassy verge on the left by about 2 metres, I think. It allows the whole system to work by gravity feed without too many needs for hilltop pumping stations. There is one pumping station between us and the reservoir, which I think is about 500 metres to the north of us. Anyway, that just shows one possibility of webcams that isn't frequently explored, and if you have faults in your antenna that you want to have a look at more closely, using a squid pole, a webcam and a USB cord may be the answer. Anyway, now the next item on the program is Peter Parker's QRP by the Bay. This is VK3AML. If you want to look in on the video that accompanies the audio that you'll hear, please Google VK3AML 10 December 2022. And I'll just go to the next item. QRP by the Bay. Peter Parker's QRP by the Bay, a day for ham operators of home-built transmitting gear and low-power equipment. Victory Park, Chelsea. And we went there by bus. The 902 bus, you go through Springvale and you realise how multicultural Melbourne is when you see architecture like this. Buddhist temples and Taoist temples and all sorts of things. Getting further south now, near the wetlands at the back of Chelsea and Edith Vale. The wetlands, you look out the window and see those reeds shoulder high, and then you run along the Frankston Railway, which has been really hugely upgraded of recent times. This is coming into Chelsea, and the railway at Chelsea goes now underground in a trench, and the station looks like a spaceship. It's quite a change from the old timber 1930s rail station that used to be there, and over the top of it there's a massive overpass. Just hang on a sec, I've got to get rid of a bit of a echo which is coming from the monitor screen that I've got here. Done. Okay, out at Chelsea Station, a quick look at the bus that brought us there, 902 bus from eventually at the other end of this line it goes to Melbourne Airport. And this is the new overpass at Chelsea. Pretty spectacular view. That's looking south towards Frankston. And Dissolve takes us to the northward view towards Melbourne. Joins the other lines at Caulfield. Getting out on the shop side, quick look around the shops. The shops are largely unchanged, but a few of the old op shops have not survived COVID, and quite a few of the food places, but the Inca Gourmet that we go to after QRP by the Bay is fortunately still there. To get to Victory Park, where Peter holds this, you go down a little side street, a sort of a pedestrian mall called the Strand. And if you walk to the end of that, past all of the pigeons pooping everywhere, you get to Victory Park and get honked by a car who's trying to get past you while you're taking a video. On the left, you'll see a number of suspicious-looking bods with a very tall squid pole holding two crossed dipoles. I think it's one for 20 metres, one for 40 metres. And they were run by, I'm just trying to think of his name. Sorry, it will come to me. Joe Gonzalez, 3YSP originally, now 3SRC. He erected this before we got there. There's the thin coax feeding the balin at the top. And on the left, VK3AML showing us his portable setup. I'll just bring up the audio.
How would you do that with a VNA?
Okay.
I've got a VNA.
How to tune it with a VNA.
And that's 10 metres of cable, so you don't have to sit with the antenna.
There's Peter, 3YE.
Oh, nice. Set it up somewhere. Hang on, let's just put all of those on so it's easier to squid that in.
And there's about to be a race.
I'm not sure if the 40, which way does that go?
A race to get these up in time.
And that's 40, but those two marks there sort of roughly.
Oh, I see there.
There's the tuning on 3TT's antenna.
Whereas
Well,
another
in theory, the loading coil, that should be 40 because it's bigger than
3TT is on a visit actually from England.
We should have a antenna. I'll see which of us can put up their antennas quickest.
Ah, all right.
I'll leave you. So you've got a head start, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll accept
I know
that.
who's going to win this, Peter.
What's connected to what here?
And he's
Is
off.
this connected to there or to there? See what I'm saying? The sliding thing. How does that work?
Peter has an antenna
It's
that
short.
I think it's shorter.
attaches.
Well, it's
Let's
short
turn this down a bit. It attaches to a nylon breadboard inside that pack, and he can walk around with a 5.5 metre squid pole poking up vertically from his backpack. Whereas Joe Krieger, has a spike on his antenna with a tuning coil and an extendable metal whip on top of the tuning coil. Like that. And that's Joe 3TT. Up with the extendable part. And he was quite quick to get his station on the air too, but Peter, of course, has had a lot of practice. There's Joe, he's putting out ground radials. It's split ribbon cable, actually. We're in an unoccupied part of Victory Park, so nobody was likely to trip over this except ourselves. Unfortunately, we were sensible enough not to. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima with the regular Saturday night test transmission. If you want to see the video of QRP by the Bay, please Google our live stream, VK3AML 10 December 2022. There's the coax connector on 3TET's antenna down by the ground. And Joe Gonzalez 3SRC is taking videos of the tuning arrangement, the tuning coil. This is a little later, they'd got a bit further with the transmitting arrangements. Peter has an FT817, I think it is, in that little pack. And they're still rushing to get their stuff ready. Not quite a competition, but not quite not. That yellow wire is Peter's driven element, and when Peter steps into the water on the beach, he puts a metal bracelet round his ankle to make what he calls the wade tenor. And he's off. There's Peter with his 5.5 metre back-mounted antenna. You don't go walking under high tension lines with a thing like that, incidentally. And it's remarkable how few people make any comment on it. You would think that it would be an unwelcome attention attractor, but it actually isn't in practical terms, except when people like Joe Gonzalez wants to take a video with his mobile phone. Good on you, Joe. Peter connecting all the bits in for his FT817, and he's receiving. Which band are we listening on, Pete?
VK8VF.
Whoa!
So that's in Darwin, I think.
Others had started arriving, including Graham Anderson, VK3QH, Paul, VK3APR, Ian Simpson, VK3TB, and eventually Matthew, 3ARD. That's Julie Gonzalez with the transmitters that she shares with Joe. Getting a permanent visual record of Peter 3YE's system and Joe 3TET's system. Joe in the blue shirt with the brown pants. And Peter's listening around for CW signals. There's Joe's Ellicraft.
Please pick this guy.
Just check your eye dilation.
Very nice transceiver, that one. Listening on 40 metres, obviously. New type of jewel. And there's Tom, VK3FTOM, who also is videoing. 3QH on the left, Graham Anderson.
Yeah, good yourself.
3APR Paul behind him.
Show us this little red, Joe.
Ah, guess what? I got my battery's dead or something. Sorry.
Holden's problems.
First of all,
Okay, we're looking at a
True SD.
I have a problem.
Oh, I see. It's got a readout.
I'm part way there.
In there.
Be able to do anything about it.
I'm sure we can probably find you a reaction.
And you've got, what, a transmitter at the bottom?
That's a tuner.
Fully software-defined transceiver, 5 watts, and look at the size of it. Look him up.
Always put the stomach pump on him about
What sort of coax is this?
the guy who's got interest.
316.
316.
It's better than RG.
Yeah, just this.
God, you got the gear.
Whoa.
Somebody read the Boy Scout manual? You don't. I've had too many bad experiences of not having the right bits.
Joe certainly comes prepared. Look at that toolkit. Be prepared.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong? Me not doing it right, that's why. Lovely little paddle there, that's pretty cool.
We'll get those back to front.
Otherwise, stuff goes smoky.
Yeah, I just got to strip this out.
Good. What about you?
Good. You had a good time down at down the Tidal River.
Well, this is a 3-transistor CW transceiver for 40 metres.
Built by 3YE.
5 watts output, crystal controlled. There's 2 frequencies that you can switch between.
Crystals.
The transmitter is 2 transistors. This is the crystal oscillator, BD139, and that's on all the time, whether it be transmit or receive. And that's the power amplifier and IRF 510. Now, on the receive side, you've got just a single transistor, which does everything, except you've got the signal coming in, the local oscillator from this transistor that's used on the transmitter as well. But apart from that, this transistor is an RF amplifier and an audio amplifier, and there's some reflexing going on, so there's feedback through the circuit. There's a
1920s.
Edwin Armstrong stuff, and there's a diode detector there, which this is basically a direct conversion receiver, and the diode detector just, the signal comes, it sends the signal back to the transistor to amplify as an audio. So you can see quite a few RF chokes in there, and that's part of us splitting the RF from the audio with capacitors and chokes. But it does work, and I have had contacts up to hundreds of kilometres away.
7 megahertz 5 watt CW.
Yeah.
For 2 frequencies.
Yeah. And there's a bit of frequency agility because the variable capacitor, so that provides a bit of offset, which you need because the receive frequency needs to be slightly different from the transmit frequency to work.
Okay. And that presumably your power out.
Yeah, that's the final transistor, and then all these is the low pass filter.
Okay, thanks Pete. VK3JCO John with VK3TET. VK3ACZ Peter. I think that's 3QH Graham on the left, Peter 3YE. And there is 3ARD. By this time, Joe was communicating with quite a few stations on his Ellicraft.
CQ, VK3, SRC, Victor Kilo
No,
3.
it's actually VK3AML, but
4 QRP by the bay, and public transport on the air. The VK3 SRC calling CQ and listening. The VK3 JRO, VK3 SRC, good afternoon. I hope you're well. And my name is Joe, I'm here with Julie. VK3 JRO, VK3 SRC. Two.
Joe, we've talked a couple of times. I'm in the room if you can remember. You're running about 5 by 4.
Roger. Thanks for that. I got your call sign wrong. VK2 JRO. What was the name again?
John.
Yeah, good on you, John. You're coming in loud and clear. You're around about a strength 7 into Chelsea Beach, John. It's about 30 kilometres, let's say, from Melbourne. And on the beach, as I said, And we're doing Peter Parker VK3 VK3YE's QRP by the Bay.
Which, as you can hear, had quite a few visitors by this stage.
VK2 JRO VK3SRC.
VK2SRC, VK2JRO. Oh, good, Joe. I tracked you from Victoria into Tasmania with you a couple of weeks ago. You're obviously back on the road again in Victoria.
When you're operating portable, you might want to instead make it lighter and smaller, yet still do the things that you want from it. That's what I'm going to describe today, what I call the Wade Tenor DX. You've probably seen my previous video on the Wade Tenor, a pedestrian mobile antenna that I can use on frequencies from 7 through to 50 megahertz.
And then Peter gave us a demonstration of his Wade Tenor. Went down with...
Here's what it includes. Just like with the original Wade Tenor, it's a plastic chopping board in a backpack and a 5.4 metre telescoping fishing pole. That provides the support for the radiating element, which is this piece of thin insulated wire. Now, the same length as with the Wade Tenor, except there's no loading coil in the middle.
There's an ankle bracelet.
That coil was only used for 7 megahertz, and I didn't need to cover 7 megahertz with this version, so I've left it out. Whereas before I had a rotary switch and an iron-powered toroid so I could get different inductance values, this time I've simplified it down to one value only, 1 microhenry. The variable capacitor goes up to about 200 picofarad. So there's the BNC that plugs into the antenna socket on the FT817, a banana socket which goes to a bit of wire that goes in the water,
and some lookers on, including 3ACZ, 3QH, and one other who I can't identify, who's taking photographs of Peter and Tom. So I wasn't the only person photographing. There's 3ACZ on the right. And this gives you some idea of how crowded the beach was, and not one of them were taking the slightest bit of notice of Peter with his 5.4 metre squid pole on his back. That's looking south towards Frankston. Mind you, with those jet skis doing circles so close to the swimmers, I was a little bit worried. And this is looking north the other way. The whole of that beach, as far as the eye can see, crowded to the scuppers. Looking back towards Beaumaris.
More like maritime mobile. Then all I've got is... Sounds like you're a part of the counterpoise of the antenna system, eh?
Satellite antenna's working beautifully. If you're in contact with the ground, the noise level is higher, and presumably also your transmitted signal is stronger. But overall, it's a lightweight, portable antenna system that gets great reports, and I'd certainly be using this as my main pedestrian mobile antenna.
The other thing too, I suspect people wouldn't be ringing the terrorism hotline every time they see you with that magnetic loop. But now that you just look like a fisherman who's got a bag full of fish, probably in a fishing pole, so you'll blend right in, that's for sure.
No, he doesn't quite look like a fisherman, but anyway. And there's Peter on the beach with his squid pole arrangement. The rest of us spent our time a little bit more restfully sitting under the tea tree having a natter. Graham, Peter,
I didn't realise he had so much.
and Paul, I think.
We're being videoed, are we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, this was the most, to me at least, the most interesting thing that I saw in the whole day. It was easy to miss, it was inconspicuous, it only involved one 1 metre grid pack reflector antenna, but Paul VK3DBP set up, within about 6 feet of us, an actual radio telescope. And he was detecting interstellar hydrogen emissions about 1420 megahertz. Now, I took a very quick video of the readout on his telescope because, of course, it's digitally recorded by like that, cumulative. That's Paul at the back there with the multicoloured T-shirt. And here's Paul to describe what he's doing.
A great alternative to optical astronomy is the growing field of radio astronomy. The power and relatively low cost of modern electronics can be harnessed to enable students to receive and analyse radio signals from space. A low-cost software-defined radio plugged into a USB port on a laptop computer can be set up to receive radio signals from a variety of sources. A suitable antenna can be built from materials obtained from a hardware shop. The Sun produces radio emissions across a wide range of frequencies which can be detected using a basic antenna and radio receiver. One approach uses the drift scan method, in which the Sun passes in front of a fixed antenna to produce a characteristic graphical pattern. Interactions between Jupiter and one of its moons, Io, produces bursts of radio signals which can be detected using a simple antenna and radio receiver. The program Radio Jupiter Pro can be used to predict when radio signals might be heard. The Radio Jove project is well established and introduces students to a community of active amateur scientists. Hydrogen atoms in space exist in one of two states, with the spin of the electron and proton parallel or antiparallel. When a hydrogen atom flips from one state to the other, it emits a pulse of radio energy on a well-defined frequency around 1420 MHz. Hydrogen emissions from our own galaxy can be detected with relatively simple equipment. With guidance, students can design and build a directional horn antenna using off-the-shelf materials. This simple example was constructed from foil-coated insulating sheets for the horn, thin metal sheet for the resonant receiving cavity, and brass tubing for the antenna itself. As an alternative approach, a complete ready-built system can be purchased at modest cost to detect and analyse hydrogen line emissions from our own galaxy.
And that grid pack antenna with that laptop computer and a very simple, almost a dongle receiver was what was being used by Paul Butler, who you see at the bottom left here, to receive the hydrogen emissions of our galaxy, the galactic noise, down at Victory Park. It is as simple as that. So go ahead, build your own radio telescope. I'm not joking. This is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night test transmission. Back to Paul Butler, VK3DBP.
Coupled with a software-defined radio, a modular low-noise amplifier and narrow filter, these simple antennas allow the collection of real-time radio astronomy data for analysis and interpretation. The radio signal is weak from a relatively small antenna even after amplification, so the signal must be averaged over 5 minutes or more so that the peak becomes visible. It's broadened because of the Doppler effect due to relative motion between the source and the receiving antenna. Final processing in Excel produces graphs like these examples of the hydrogen line emission from our own galaxy collected by my own system. Many professional astronomers now collect data from remotely controlled optical and radio telescopes. The growth of technology in this field has resulted in a range of online telescopes becoming available for public access. Some are optical telescopes, others are radio telescopes.
Now back to our work at QRP. Here we are packing up, and there's 3ZZC telling the story of the big signal that got away at the back there. Julie Gonzalez helping her husband to pack.
I got this in the UK.
Peter 3ACZ and Joe 3TET describing his, dare I say it, bow thing. He said, spitting. We then made tracks to the local Peruvian restaurant and I must say it's a mouth-waterer. I'm not supposed to advertise, so I won't mention the name of the restaurant. I may have done it in the past, I won't again. But they make pork belly, fried pork belly, or rather, pork belly, and in the Peruvian way, which is unbelievably good. So we ordered that, and that's what came out, and it's as good as it looks. So then we had a natter with the boys. Peter 3YE, Julian Joe Gonzalez, 3SRC, 3ARD Matt, and by this time we'd finished our dinner and were just nattering about every subject under the sun, from politics to software-defined radio. Tom, you're on candid camera. And there's Tom with myself. So, that rounded out a very enjoyable day at Chelsea with QRP by the Bay, and I believe Peter 3YE is planning to organise another one for sometime, I think in February, so watch this space. I know that QRP by the Bay has their own Facebook page run by Peter, so you might, if you're on Facebook, you might care to dial up QRP by the Bay and see what date Peter is suggesting. Okay, I'll have a quick look to see what comments there are there, not too many. One of the complications of the system changes made by the streaming software now is that it's difficult for me to see how many people are actually watching simultaneously. I have no readout on that, so I know that there are a few people watching because we've got a few ticks. However, let's go over to New Zealand now and a success story. TAIT Electronics, TAIT, TAIT radios will be known to many of you, but the history of the company, based in Christchurch, New Zealand, is probably known to very few. And I'm sure that the TAIT people won't mind me streaming this video of their history.
Sir Angus Tate, radio pioneer, innovative businessman, dedicated manager and mentor, humble, hard-working and loyal. Born in Oamaru in July 1919, Angus was the youngest of 4 children. His father having died before he was born, Angus knew he had to do things for himself. No one would do it for me. His mother Lucy instilled the Tate work ethic. Work hard, don't expect too much from life, and any rewards will be a pleasant bonus. Fate and determination helped guide the man into business. Electronics had been a hobby of his from when he was barely a teenager. Being fascinated by, but frustrated with, the limitations of crystal radio sets, Angus started to devour information on ham radios and valve sets. The first opportunity for Angus to follow his passion was an opening at a local radio shop. He was 17 when he left school without qualifications. The next 4 years saw Angus sit a few trade exams and pick up some credentials before the world descended into war. Angus volunteered for the RNZAF in World War II and rose to become an instructor, teaching the essentials of airborne radar, a new, exciting wartime technology. He remained in England for 6 more years before returning to New Zealand with his wife Hazel in 1947. Returning from the crowded wartime cities of England to the open plains of Canterbury would prove a challenge for many returning servicemen, but not Angus. Utilising his wartime knowledge and pioneering spirit, he set up a shop in Cashel Street, doing something with electronics. Not knowing where to take his career, a young Mr. Tate found his calling at the New Zealand Post Office. They were building VHF stations at high points around the country, leaving the industry, and more specifically Angus, to develop the mobile equipment. In 1948, Angus formed his first company, TAIT Limited, on the back of mobile radio sales to two taxi companies. TAIT Limited, the M stood for Angus's middle name, Macmillan, developed the T4 radio, which contributed to much of the company's success. Without any sort of business plan, the company's staff swelled to 100 people by the mid-1960s, when TAIT Limited even experimented with making televisions. But by 1967, TAIT Limited was in receivership. But Angus's motivation was about more than making money. He was committed to being a leader in the high-tech industry. Rather than take early retirement, Angus remortgaged his house and started again, telling his bank manager, "I won't make the same mistakes again." He then signed a document and said, "Instead, I'll make new mistakes in future." TAIT Electronics was born. Angus asked 12 of his best staff whether they wanted to help him push the boat out again. And just days after his first company closed its doors, those same staff joined Angus and launched the new company at 42 Bedford Row in inner-city Christchurch. Angus didn't hold a grudge against those who had put him into receivership. Instead, he brought them onto his side and retained them as advisors. Again, fate intervened. Angus was on the Wahine passenger ship when it struck a reef and floundered in Wellington Harbour, tantalisingly close to safety. Factory staff listened to the radio half an island away with bated breath for news of their boss. 610 passengers were on board. Already casualties had been reported. Finally, a phone call came through. Angus had survived, still clutching vital business contracts, which he took to the post office the very next day. Having survived the worst shipwreck in New Zealand history, one that cost 51 of his fellow travellers their lives, Angus now understood how much the business meant to him. Nothing would sway him from seeing his business survive. But on a personal level, Angus would never travel by ship again. To quote, "The last one I was on sank." The space race to put the first man on the moon would open new doors for Angus Tait's next venture. A lot of effort was put into developing RF transistors to provide astronauts with suitable radio communications, which in turn led TAIT to become the first company in Australasia to build the all-transistor mobile radio. From there, TAIT Electronics flourished. During the 1970s, the TAIT mini-phone boosted sales and took TAIT to the top of the New Zealand market. By the end of the 1970s, Angus realised his ambitions to begin exporting worldwide, first to the United Kingdom. In the next 20 years, Angus also steered exports to the USA and Australia, where offices were also established. The growing success of TAIT Electronics was highlighted in 1994 when the company won the New Zealand Governor-General's Supreme Award for Exporter of the Year for the second time, while the following year, the Queen of England toured the company's facilities while on a royal visit. Angus's passion to promote education and nurture local talent led to the company contributing a substantial sum to the University of Canterbury's Engineering School, as well as a pledge for $1 million to the university's Wireless Research Centre in 2005. The biggest reflection of Angus Tait's generosity came when he decided to put his shares in TAIT Electronics into a trust, following the example of power tools company founder Robert Bosch. The move meant that manufacturing jobs would stay in Canterbury for perpetuity at the expense of an accumulation of Sir Angus's personal wealth. Indeed, when asked about the many offers made by large competitors for his company, he replied, "What the hell would I want with $50 million, compared with the satisfaction of putting together something that is worthwhile? There is no comparison as far as I'm concerned." Angus's selfless business practices created mutual loyalty with staff. He provided staff with health and superannuation benefits long before the latter was made compulsory. Many of the original 12 TAIT Electronics staff still work for the company over 30 years on. Over the years, New Zealand and the radio communications industry as a whole had honoured Angus for his dedication and hard work. Awarded with an honorary doctorate by the University of Canterbury, Angus was quick to deflect the credit to the supporting TAIT team. Bestowed with a knighthood in 1999, a modest Sir Angus quickly let it be known that plain Angus is fine by me. The Radio Club of America also awarded him for his substantial contributions to the advancement of land mobile radio in 2006. Of course, he was modest about his achievements. While being congratulated during the company's 35th birthday celebrations, Sir Angus quipped, "My role has been very minuscule. I've done a lot of standing around. I've become very good at it, and I assure you, I intend to do a lot more of it." Sadly, Sir Angus Macmillan Tait, Knight Companion to the New Zealand Order of Merit, keen gardener, photographer and aviator, passed away in August 2007. But his company continues to prosper thanks to the trust structure he set up before he died to help ensure that TAIT Electronics remains its own company in perpetuity.
The company has a great future for the very simple reason that we have maintained over the years a consistent policy of reinvestment in the company.
His parting advice to the next generations of electronics and radio pioneers was to recognise the industry as a sphere of activity that has no bounds. Don't be concerned that you'll be bored and be doing the same thing every day. It's moving so quickly with new technologies that are emerging. I hesitate to predict where it will go. Always an amateur radio enthusiast, call sign ZL3NL, Angus kept up to date with the latest technologies. And right up until the end at 88 years of age, Sir Angus drove into work in his characteristic red Alfa Romeo. But rather than use a parking space, he pretty much parked right by the front door. After all, it was his name on the office sign.
The TAIT radio concern of New Zealand, a unique and very welcome success story in the face of Chinese competition in the radio manufacturing line. And that clip, by courtesy of TAIT Electronics, I felt that it was not as such an advertisement, so it probably passes muster for our amateur transmission, which is currently on 147.475. And for those who are interested in seeing the accompanying video on all of this, please Google VK3AML 10 December 2022. That's Google VK3AML 10 December 2022. Well, time's running a little short, so I'll skip the next item, which was on ICOM UK. I hope with the indulgence of my viewers, to talk a little bit about the work that I used to do as a working person, which was to do with the history of media. Film, sound recording, radio, television. An accent on sound recording, that's the way I got into historical documentary work on radio. I was a record collector originally, 78 RPM discs, cylinders, other obsolete media. But that took me into a career also in documentary film. I did quite a bit of work for Film Australia, now Screen Australia, and some compilation work also for the National Film and Sound Archive. But the film that you're about to see is not from the Film and Sound Archive. It's from Melbourne's own Australian Centre for the Moving Image. And just the last couple of years, they've encouraged a website to be set up, a YouTube and Vimeo website, where they're progressively digitising a lot of the films that used to be in the old State Film Centre. The State Film Centre was set up post-war, post-Second War that is, to make available to schools and educational institutions of other types documentary films chiefly, and they accumulated an unbeatable collection of documentary films, both current and retrospective. Now, a story. About 45 years ago, I was friendly with an elderly projectionist at RMIT in their media centre. His name was Sid Williams. Sid had for many, many years been in charge of tutoring secondary teachers, high school teachers, in the usage of projectors, 16mm film projectors. Of course, these are the days in high schools and primary schools before the availability of home video. And the State Film Centre was very much a centre for that, but RMIT was the educational institution promoting it. Now, Sid knew that in RMIT's archives there was a 16mm film, which he showed me on a projector in about 1978, taken in the streets of Melbourne. 16mm film, direct reversal, amateur of origin, not professionally shot, although obviously shot on a tripod by somebody who knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, a little bit grainy, so there was a kind of a grainy fog on the film. But I could see that it was a very comprehensive view of Melbourne. I wasn't aware of the exact date, but since taking a look at the video of this, I'm sure that it's either late 1926, somewhere between late 1926 and late 1927. So you're about to see Melbourne as it was 95 or 96 years ago, the Melbourne of my parents when they were in their teens. And it's a very different Melbourne. Now, I saw it projected direct from film, with lots of grain, scratches, and all the rest. And ACMI have appointed a digital restoration person with a reasonable amount of restoration gear, and they have recently, in the last few months, applied that restoration gear to this 1920s film of Melbourne, giving it a bit of false colour even. That's neither here nor there, it just makes it look a bit prettier. But what fairly obviously this computer software has done is it compares image information that's common to successive frames, retains that image information and gets it out of the noise level of the grain, which is very bad on this film. Now, I'm sure that they won't mind me streaming this to the minuscule number of viewers that I normally get, but this is just indicating that finally we have an Australian organisation, the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, very laudably making their material available in very high definition. In fact, this was made available in 4K, made available with restoration, and made available freely. Previous organisations have only allowed scraps of films out with very, very poor internet definition. So this is a major step, politically, technically, in basically every way. So without further ado, I'll show you this extraordinary piece of restoration work. I called it Melbourne 1928, but I'm fairly sure this is 1927 for reasons I'll go into when you actually see the images. This is VK3AML, with thanks to ACMI. Melbourne 1927, I got the date wrong. 16mm film we thought was made by the first intake of students to the Projectionist Studies course, but now we're fairly sure it's not. We think it may be by an Adelaide amateur who came to Melbourne, possibly associated with RMIT. For the next 20 minutes you're going to be in the 1920s in Melbourne. And for some reason we haven't got the musical track. Pardon me, I'll just stop that for a moment and I'll go to the other version of the clip, which has the music. That one. Here we go. Sorry about the delay. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Flinders Street, looking across from St Paul's. The previous year they'd electrified the tram line in Swanston Street. No longer cable trams there, although Flinders Street had them. Under the clocks. Quite recognisable, a place where friends still meet 95 years later. If we take a right turn, we look up Flinders Street at the cable trams in Flinders. Snow's Menswear opposite. Elizabeth Street, looking north from Flinders. And Flinders Street Station, looking southeast from Elizabeth Street. Collins Street, the Fitzroy tram, and the Kodak building. You'll see the slot between the tracks and the road. Take the cable. Collins Street, looking east to the Town Hall. David Waring, the Hatters, was at the corner of Collins and Elizabeth Street. In the Colonial Mutual Life Assurance building. Collins Street again. The Criterion Cafe, opposite St Paul's, 21 Swanston Street. And this is Burke Street, looking up from the Town Hall, sorry, the Post Office, and looking diagonally from the Post Office southwest. Elizabeth Street tram, cable tram. Some of the tallest buildings in Australia then looked out on that street. From Hardware Street, looking down into the Burke Street Mall area. The building on the extreme left with the globe above it is the Tivoli Theatre. Tivoli at a bit closer range, Coles Book Arcade right in the middle of the shot. Coles Book Arcade in those days was still open. And a very early version of Myers, again in the Burke Street Mall area. Looking down into the Burke Street Mall from Hardware Lane. This is looking north from St Paul's along Swanston Street. Capitol Theatre is the tallest building in the background there, and round on the left there on the corner of Flinders Lane, the Nicholas building, which had been built 2 years earlier. Over Princes Bridge Station, looking north along Swanston. And now we're at Flinders Street Station. Notice the cars in the TAIT train are first and second class. There's Young and Jackson's, and that's a Charabang, for those who don't know what they are. Looking south down St Kilda Road. No arts centre at that stage, of course. brand new electric tram which had only just replaced the cable service. From Prince's Bridge, looking towards what's now the MCG. The old YMCA building, recently demolished, was built in 1923 on South Bank. Queensbridge Street. Queensbridge was the bridge that was furthest downstream on the Yarra at that stage. Spencer Street Bridge was to be built 2 years later. South Melbourne cable tram coming up. That's a pie cart, for those of you who have heard of such things, looking down Market Street. And the block at Collins Street where fashionable people walked around to be seen. The latest fashions of 1927. What price that cloche hat? The Café Français, corner of Swanson and Little Collins. Looking up Flinders Street, east, probably around William Street. Queensbridge Street again. And now we're on a train running from Flinders Street to Spencer Street. We've just passed Queensbridge there, and surprise, surprise, steamers used to pull up in the Yarra right up to Queensbridge Street. The steamers for Port Arlington and Geelong you could pick up right here. It used to be called the Swing Basin. There was a sort of a broadening of the Yarra here. Spencer Street Station. And that used to be called the Hotel Alexander. I believe this is Spencer Street. I believe it's now called the Savoy Plaza. To the left, in the background, the Spencer Street Post Office. And there's the Spencer Street Post Office at close range. They pan right in this shot and unfortunately miss by a hair's breadth showing the Vocalion recording studio, which is where all of the commercial recordings made in Melbourne were cut during the 1920s, just to the right of the building on the right. Looking across Spencer Street at the parcels office of Spencer Street Station. The office building is still there, the rest is gone. Queen Victoria Hospital, Lonsdale Street. A fragment of it remains, but it was originally taking up the entire block. And serviced by cable tram in 1927, as you see. Electric trams in Swanson Street, and that's a single bogie tram of the type they used later in Bendigo. State Library of Victoria in those days had an iron railing fence, and that was taken in a scrap drive during World War II. The State Library had a concrete dome designed by Sir John Monash, which in the time of its building, 1913, was the largest concrete dome in the world. Statue of Joan of Arc is still there. College of Pharmacy is up the top end of Swanson Street near RMIT's present location. Most of those buildings have been demolished. Swanson Street single bogie tram. Looking down Swanson Street from Lonsdale. And these days, the Shrine of Remembrance would be taking up the end view of Swanson Street. It wasn't built in 1927. The domain was just bush then. Portico of the Melbourne Town Hall in the distance on the left, and St Paul's not yet with its spires built. The Orient Hotel on the left was at the corner of Burke and Swanson. Melbourne Town Hall. They're taking it at a slower pace, but then this is the period of Miss Fisher and her murder mysteries. And there you can see the first of the spires going up on St Paul's. The scaffold is there. It took them another 10 years to finish the big one, the Moorhouse spire. Bottom end of Elizabeth Street, two very well dressed young men. Corner of Collins Street, Elizabeth Street. Dunklings the Jewellers, still there. Kodak on the right, that was there until recently. Looking up Elizabeth. Now in those days you could take a train to Port Melbourne, that's the Port Melbourne station with an overpass that no longer exists, and you could hop on a bay steamer to go to any of the towns around the bay, Geelong, Port Arlington, Queenscliff, Sorrento. And this was the main bay steamer, the paddle steamer Hygeia, launched in 1890, commenced its bay service in December 1890 and ran for 41 years. It was a very big ship, 987 gross tonnes, one of the biggest paddle steamers that Australia has ever seen, 300 feet long, 32 feet in the beam. In good weather it could do an average of 22.8 miles per hour. Passengers boarding for Geelong, Port Arlington and Queenscliff. Please note, paddle steamers could go in extremely shallow draft. I think the draft of this steamer was only about 12 feet, so it didn't need a very deep water port. Very pretty ship. A leisurely way to get from Melbourne to Port Arlington. The ship mileage is much shorter than the road mileage, and with the speed limit in those days at 30 miles an hour and the Geelong Road in a pretty tacky condition, it'd take you a very long time to get to Port Arlington by road. But things were rapidly improving in the motor transport area, and by 1930 the patronage for the Hygeia had declined precipitously. The Depression finally killed the service. In 1931, the Hygeia was removed from service and sunk after being stripped outside Port Phillip Heads in June 1932. And this was what it was like on board. Up to 2,000 people could travel on this battle steamer at a time. It was a lifeline for many years for places like Sorrento and Portsea, where in the early days the road to Sorrento and Portsea was just a sand track. In fact, it was still a sand track by 1929. A couple of schoolboys looking at the paddle wheel. There's the paddle house with some people sitting on it. Must have been a very, very calm day to get this. And here we are coming into Queenscliff. Interesting, only one of the two lighthouses is there. The old black lighthouse is there, but the white lighthouse is not yet built. Coming into the wharf. Such was life 95 years ago. The Ozone Hotel, you can spot that up the hill there. Oh, I see the White Lighthouse. It's just on the left there. And the Hygeia steams off for Sorrento and off into oblivion. My parents had great nostalgia for the ferry trips that they took in the teens and 20s, and I can see why. It'd be a very different way to see the towns around the bay. Especially when very few cars were on the road and the roads were dirt tracks. And welcome back to 2022. This is VK3AML. I thought that may be of interest to some people, just throwing it in as a Christmas extra. One more Christmas extra before I finish. And this is produced by a very interesting young man who was into electronics of a certain type. His name was Robert JUCKERT, born 1904, died 1938, died tragically young. I'll tell you a bit more of the story when we show his home movies here. And these have been made available very generously by Leo Hogan, who's Paul JUCKERT's grandson. The JUCKERT home movies. 16mm home movies made by Robert A. JUCKERT. Robert JUCKERT followed his father Gus as an early X-ray technician. Until 1933, Robert was the chief X-ray tech at St Vincent's Hospital. The job demanded photographic skills applicable to filmmaking, Robert's hobby. Robert JUCKERT was a high achiever, but his life was tragically cut short by the hard times of the Depression, by the loss of his job and his marriage in 1933, and by Lynch syndrome, a hereditary disease leading to his death from cancer at the age of only 34. Robert had 2 daughters, one of whom died of the same disease in 1994. We're deeply indebted to Leo Hogan, Robert JUCKERT's grandson, for the usage of these film extracts. And here's his mother and Robert in about 1930 at their home at what was then called Regent. It's now called Reservoir. Robert at this time 26 years old. And this is where he worked, St Vincent's Hospital, Victoria Parade, Nicholson Street. Cable tram service going up Nicholson. A view of Victoria Parade. Don't be too overwhelmed by the heavy traffic. This is 92 years ago. Oh, and isn't that a nice A model Ford? Very new by the looks of it too. And there's its owner, who'll take us for a car ride in a moment. So we'll see an extremely early dash cam, the exhibition building. You'd be lucky to see one car every 50 seconds. These days it's 4 lanes wide of chaos. Exhibition building from Spring Street. The steps of Parliament, Victorian Parliament. And now let's follow Robert JUCKERT and some friends walking into Fitzroy Gardens. One of them carrying a box that looks like the camera case for the 16mm camera. And there's Robert JUCKERT on the left, obviously one of his friends pushing the shoot button on the 16mm camera. And now dash cam. Going up Albert Street, turning at St Peter's Eastern Hill, looking down MacArthur Street, and we're going towards Collins Street. They'd electrified the trams by this stage. I think that happened in 1929. St Michael's on the right. And this is the Paris end of Collins Street. Coming down towards Swanson Street now. Quite a bit of traffic even in 1929. And obviously the suspension of the A-model Ford was a little bit bouncier than we are now. That's the Kodak building. Robert's probably buying some X-ray plates there. Kodak building in Collins Street. Now driving back up Collins Street to another business that Robert dealt with, an X-ray supplier, Philips X-ray. I think that was Robert running in to get something, or it might be one of his friends. Now back up MacArthur Street. Quite a bit of horse transport still in those days. Going up towards what later became part of St Vincent's, but then was called the Mount St Evans Hospital. Looking south-east across the Yarra from Prince's Bridge at Alexandra Drive on the other side. And here's Robert sitting beside the river on Alexandra Drive, having a relaxing cigarette in the days when they knew none of the dangers involved with the practice. Robert was a radiographer working at St Vincent's Hospital from 1927. His father Gus was one of the earliest Australian X-ray people. Now a trip to St Kilda in 1929. Coming up to the Palais Theatre, Plaza Ballroom long gone, Luna Park ahead of us, and the Palais de Danse briefly seen on the right there. The Palais de Danse burnt down in 1968. Used to have a fun park at the back of it. Going down towards Elwood on the lower esplanade. That little building still there. All handheld on a 16mm camera. Now we're at the end of Ormond Esplanade and going out onto the beach. Turning into the Elwood Beach car park. I wonder how much those cars would be on the collector's market if they were still around today. Obviously a nice hot summer day at the end of 1929. Elwood Sea Baths. I think it's still open, but as a restaurant. And there's Robert with his wife to the left of him, his sister-in-law, and a friend. Elwood Beach in a long panning shot, looking down towards Brighton Pier in that direction. A nice broad sandy beach, well patronised in those days. Sister-in-law, Cass, Elwood Lifesaving Club. They managed to catch the family looking very sheepish at the camera here. Robert's wife on the left, sister-in-law on the right. Taking more than a little notice of their form, I think. Point Ormond in the distance. Look very closely across the bay, you might just spot the Yuyangs there. In those days they used to have changing sheds, men's and women's separately of course, and Robert is being a bit cheeky here by almost following his wife and sister-in-law into the changing sheds. No, you can't follow them, Rob. That's private. Another shot of the beach. Looking south along Elwood Beach. I think the sands are considerably wider then than they are now. Wife Ellen and sister-in-law Kath coming back from the changing sheds in the latest 1929 fashions. And sister-in-law with boyfriend, fairly obviously. And now up to the Dandenong Ranges, and we're in Olinda, and that Quamby tea room on the left is now called the Cuckoo Restaurant. There's the modern view, there's 1930. And that's the main Mount Dandenong Tourist Road, which is single-lane dirt at this stage. We're heading for Sassafras. Don't hit the dog! You're only doing 5 miles an hour anyway. Otherwise you'd slip off the road. There's a very good reason that cars of that period had a big ground clearance. The roads were pretty awful. Remember that this is the most frequented road in the Dandenong Ranges. God knows what tertiary roads were like at that time. Sassafras. Miss Marple's tea room is now on the left there. And thanks for Leo Hogan doing these overlays. Leo Hogan being the cameraman's grandson, as I pointed out. Looks like this might have been winter. They're all rugged up fairly well. Heading now for Ferny Creek. Probably heading off for a picnic. And that very neatly brings us to the end of the pre-recorded section tonight. I'll now open up, I hope, on 2 metres. And I hope I catch the first people to reply to me rather than fumbling with controls for a little while. So, this is, hang on, spare page. Let's see who's with us. I'll call CQ now on 147 475. This is VK3AML. Do we have any respondents? Is anybody out there on 2 metres listening? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima listening.
Yeah, VK3 Alpha Charlie Zulu.
VK3ACZ, you appear to be the one and only at the moment, Peter. I hope the night's material wasn't too far off subject, but I thought that as this material, particularly the ACMI material with the computer enhancement, only recently had become available in vastly improved form, that it was worthwhile showing what modern computer enhancement could do to a film which was in its initial instance very flawed. Anyway, how have you been, Pete? VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
And just left a pause there in case anybody else was going to join us. VK3AML or VK3ACZ returning. Good evening, Chris. Good evening, everybody. Was it up my alley? Oh my goodness. Well, I did recommend to you that movie that's been showing at the Belgrave Cameo, The Lost History of Melbourne. It was just more of the wonderful same. Absolutely loved it. But here's the funny bit. I only saw little pieces of it. I have got homework. The 10-metre DX Worldwide contest was on today, and I was up the hill playing portable. I had the joy of listening to your entire broadcast, and I've got to compliment you on the brilliance of your narration. It was enough to fill in some of the blanks. It was just occasionally when I stopped at a set of lights or whatever, I would take a peek at the actual images. So I've got that all ahead of me. But trust me, in advance, I will enjoy them. A couple of things to tell you, just briefly, as I can't comment too extensively on the content of your material tonight, other than, as I said, the brilliant narration. Yesterday went on a seaplane flight with Sandra over Melbourne around the bay. Took a 2-metre, 70-centimetre handheld with me and made contacts with a number of people. Amazing that they could hear me over the intense loud noise of that fan at the front that you don't want to stop. But spoke to Jeff VJS on the Glen Waverley 70-centimetre repeater. Spoke to a few others as well. If it wasn't for my PTSD that makes buffeting aeroplanes a bit problematic, I would have enjoyed it a whole lot more. But one thing I will say is that I was taken by surprise at how how shallow the bay is. You could really see the bottom in so many places as we're flying along, anything between 700 and 1,500 feet. So that was a lot of fun. We had a this morning, competently organised by VK3CMC, Michael and a couple of others, we had a bit of a sale for Gary GLC's Silent Key material, and they put in a lot of work to raise some funds for his dear wife, who's doing it very tough. She lost a 6-year-old son, or Gary and her lost a 6-year-old son some years ago, I found out today talking to her. But there's a couple of things that have been of interest. Just quickly about the 10-metre DX contest. I know it wouldn't be your sort of thing, the quick hit and run, give numbers and go away. But I made 18 countries, only 2 of them Asia, like Hong Kong and JA. But the other 16 were all in Europe, so propagation's been absolutely fantastic. Funny that it takes a contest to show that the bands really are open for voice contacts, but there you go. Enough waffle from me for this round. Hopefully somebody else is there to join us. Hope you've been good, and I hope Prue was on the improve. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Have we got any other breakers? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima listening.
VK3 VJS.
Hello Jeff, VK3 VJS, VK3AML returning. I hope the material was of interest to you too, Jeff. With your Queenscliff connections, I felt sure that it would. So I might hand it round to Jeff for an over. VK3 VJS and group VK3AML.
Yes, okay, Chris. I really enjoyed the whole lot. TAIT, Melbourne, the Hygeia, everything. I thought it was fantastic. And you're quite right about the Queenscliff goal. Good evening, Pete, the ex-seaplane passenger. He obviously didn't have to swim to shore, so he made it with dry feet. That Hygeia heading down the bay, it probably had a load of customers for my grandparents' guest houses. I don't know which one. It could have been Glenalvie, it could have been Athelstane, or if it was after 1927 when they bought the burnt out and rebuilt the Grand Hotel in the main street and renamed it the View Grand, they might have been heading to either one of those 3 premises. So there you are. But it was quite good. Now, Peter's QRP by the bay, there was a gentleman down on the beach taking photos, a nefarious-looking gentleman with a white beard. That's Murray Little. I forget his call sign now. I think it's an F call, but he's a member of the fan park. So he does have form, Chris, and he's the unofficial photographer for fan park. So no doubt those photos will pop up somewhere. During your sojourn to the South American restaurant, did I see Ralph Climac there at the end of the table?
Yep.
VK3ZZC, or is it ZCC? I can never remember. But it looked like a really nice bill of fare there, Chris. Very nice. Anyway, thanks again. I've been lying here on the bed in the bedroom, and you've been coming through on the big screen. Beautiful definition, beautiful audio. No flaws or hitches tonight. I didn't even have to dial it in. I just went straight to Alexi and I said, give me YouTube. And she said, YouTube coming up. And there it was, and there you were. So I didn't have to put any VK3AML 10 on December 2022. You were there in full HD and full Technicolor. Wonders, the wonders of it all. VK3AML and the group VK3VJS.
Do we have any other breakers? VK3AML, just briefly? No, looks like that's it. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I was thinking that possibly some of those passengers were heading for your antecedents accommodation places down there, which we've discussed on numerous occasions. The nefarious Murray, I couldn't get very much conversation out of him. He sat a little way away from us. I think he may have been a little bit threatened by the fact that I had a camera with me, sitting on a tripod on one occasion, and some people get a bit camera shy, and on those occasions I make it a point of now, having been alerted by various things to the sensitivity of such things, to point it away from people who aren't completely comfortable with a video camera on them. But interestingly, a lot of people get away with it these days by using mobile phones, which is a bit more surreptitious, at least with myself using a fairly prominent video camera. I'm being honest. You are being preserved for posterity, and deal with it as you may, even if it means turning your back and giving a one-finger salute. But it'll be interesting to see if any of this turns up on the Fan Park website, particularly Peter with his 5.4 metre squid pole poking out of his backpack and bolted to a nylon cutting board that he bought from a local $2 shop. There's no doubt about him. I mean, I showed the 4-transistor complete CW transceiver that he built, and it looked like it was built into something the size, in the old days, we would have called it a strepsils tin, a tablet tin. I mean, unbelievable. So you have to hand it to him. Anyway, Peter, getting back to you, 3ACZ. Seaplane, eh? I wonder where it took up from. And was the takeoff very hairy, and did the pilot make any mention of what happens if they hit something floating in the bay and turn turtle or whatever? I've often wondered if the seaplane is actually a safe or a dicey consideration these days. You don't see them very much. Sorry to hear about GLC's sale, and was not aware about the 6-year-old son. I hope he had other offspring. But that night he came on here on Zoom, and the next morning he was gone. Certainly left me staggering around trying to assimilate the thought, the concept, for several weeks afterwards. So I hope his wife did well on that sale. And glad to hear that you got 18 countries, even if it was mostly Europe. One wonders where the signal lands between here and Europe, if anybody's listening. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
VK3AML in the group VK3ACZ, and good evening to Jeff too. He was my very first contact when we launched up into the air, and no, I didn't need to be warned of anything hitting the legs or whatever you call it, the two little canoes of the seaplane. No, I was nervous enough as it was. Actually, I was fine until the plane buffeted around a bit. It wasn't the smoothest of flights, but that's just me. I could have or perhaps should have medicated for it. It triggered me with a couple of things that you mentioned, like Queenscliff. It was great flying over and looking all that stuff at that stuff and seeing it from the air. So that was wonderful. Yeah, we left from Williamstown. We landed there. It was choppier than I would have liked, so it was a bit bumpy taking off, a bit bumpy landing. But that's okay. Any landing that you walk away from has got to be a good one. I wasn't worried about having to swim. I was worried about anything worse than that. The 10 metre DX, yeah, it'd be an interesting one. Of course, they're all short path contacts this time of day. I knew it was time for myself to pack up. We were starting to lose the propagation to Europe a little bit, but when I gave the same Scotland station a second consecutive contact when you're only supposed to have one for the contest, he didn't pick it up, so he must have had a paper log as well as me. I knew it was time to finish up with that, but amateur radio is all good. It's just a pity that it takes a contest to show that the bands are really open, like I mentioned before. What else can I say for this over? Just that, again, I will mention that I'm really looking forward to looking at the footage of Melbourne in 1927. You seriously will love that film that's been on at the Cameo. Whether it's released to DVD straight away or whether it's going to last a while or not, I don't know. But trust me, it'll be right up your alley from the sort of stuff that you show. I don't know, my eyes were nearly poking out of my head at some of the good stuff. The only problem with that film, The Lost History of Melbourne, was that for the last third of it, I think they concentrated pretty much on the cinemas around Melbourne, and perhaps I wasn't quite as interested or invested in that as I was with a lot of other things. But I better hand it back to you for this over, because I've still got to unpack some of my stuff here. VK3AML in the group, VK3ACZ.
Any other breakers? VK3AML?
VK3HAG.
VK3AKG. G'day. No worries, adding you to the list. Would you like to take it for an over? VK3 Alpha Kilo Golf, VK3AML.
VK3HAG, good evening, Chris and everybody. Yes, I was watching the video, fascinated. I think we've spoken once or twice before. I have jumped in once or twice, but not very often. Yeah, I was absolutely fascinated and loved that video, watching all the stuff about that, the trams and the cables and the crossover and the changing over of sort of that stage of society where I guess you could say we were still in the point of time where, you know, the horse and cart was being replaced by the motor vehicle in the early days of that, and the cable trams have been replaced by the electric trams, and fascinating Melbourne stuff, because I've got my great-grandfather, who was at the age in the 1850s, so that's fascinating stuff to compare to that and watch those changes through the years. Apparently you can find a lot of them on the internet, but I haven't seen stuff like that anyway. Anyway, VK3AML, VK3HAG.
VK3HAG, VK3AML returning. Well, ACMI only over the last few years has apparently appointed somebody to look after their website and upload lots of film material which would now be out of copyright to that website, and it's making available an immense amount of stuff in very good video transfers. Another thing I noticed on the ACMI website recently were the 9.5mm very early, about 1925 or 6, home movies taken by somebody who you may have heard of named John Duigan, D-U-I-G-A-N. In his early days, about 1910, he was the first person in Victoria to build and fly his own aeroplane, which is now in the Museum of Victoria. But in the 1920s, he was a pioneer of home movie making with the 9.5mm Pathé gauge, and those films appear to be being uploaded progressively to the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, the ACMI YouTube site, and there's some very interesting stuff there, including some stuff taken at Essendon Airport when it was way out in the sticks. There was such a time. And the planes were literally, you fly by the seat of your pants on a wicker seat inside a canvas and wood aircraft. They're really something. So we may see something of that as time goes on and ACMI uploads more. We're living, in terms of film access, in a very interesting period. And more power to ACMI for having made the stuff available, and I sincerely hope that they have no qualms about me using that computer restored and artificially coloured, but rather attractively coloured, black and white footage of Melbourne from 1927. So it's round again to VK3VJS for any further comments, Jeff. Oh, and it was Ralph Klimek, 3ZZC, who was with us both at Victory Park. He came a little bit late, but he came to the restaurant and partook of the fare. I only took a photograph of my own meal. I assure you the others were just as good, and I'd better stop talking about that or it'll be seen as an advert, and I'll be slapped in leg irons by Steve Haynes, 3ZH, VK3VJS and group VK3AML.
Yes, okay, Chris. I couldn't pick up that other station. He was very noisy, so I switched over to the screen, and could hear him quite well through your side of it. But once you came back, I had to turn that off. So send him my regards. I don't know his name, and I've forgotten his call sign. Did I see young Tom sucking on a stubby? My God, hasn't he grown up? Because I guess he's now 18, so he can suck on a stubby. Good luck to him, as long as he doesn't suck on too many of them and get led astray. Ah, dear. That was great. And what was I going to say? Oh, golly, I had a few things, but... aeroplane flights, Pete. I've done a few hairy ones in my day. 1980 with young Earl Flynn, as a result of a long service leave. We drove many, many miles around the mid and western states of the USA, and one of our trips, of course, on the way to Lost Wages was it on the way, or had we been there and lost all our money? We took a flight over the Grand Canyon in a Cessna. that was pretty hairy, what with all the updrafts and downdrafts, and that's recorded for posterity on Super 8. That's right, Super 8 with audio. Video cameras not being available generally to the public then. So I did a direct-on-shot transfer onto VHS tape, which came out very well, all considered, and later on Errol had it done to DVD. So in the archives I've got it on VHS tape and on DVD. Another time was 2006 on the big island of Hawaii with my friends from Mount Eliza. We took a chopper ride over the active volcano Kilauea without any doors on the chopper. That made it even more interesting. So if that safety belt had given away, I would have fallen right down the throat of the volcano, never to be seen or heard of again. And then we went down the coast also where it pours into the ocean. That was a very interesting trip, very interesting. So that's about it at the moment, Chris. Oh, the cavity resonator. The chap at the Moorabbin Club has one. He had it on the table at Rosebud. It's made by Pole Air, and it covers 148 to 174 megs with the N-type sockets in and out and the tuning right in the centre. And they call it a filter, but we both know that it's a cavity resonator, Chris. So it's available. It's Uncle Roy down the club, if you remember Roy. Pity he didn't go down to Rosebud. You could have opened negotiations direct with Roy. But anyway, there's one available. And Roy lives down at the Baxter Retirement Village in Robinson's Road. The Baxter, not Baxter, what would you call it there? Frankston South, just off the Murradutt Road. So there you are, Chris. Nothing much else at this stage. Oh, I went down to Eastern Kilda yesterday. Chris, just contain yourself. Just off Hotham Street. I know what you're thinking, but you're wrong. I went down to the QDH of David Ditchfield, VK3YSK, and finally worked out why his dual band radio is not getting out very well, because he had it on low power. Now it's a very small screen, and the letter L is very hard for David to see. Same with the letter M. So I hit the button and now it's on high power, whatever that may be. But he's still restricted by a low antenna surrounded by higher buildings, Chris. That's one of his problems. But at least the radio now runs decent power. I also came away with a mantle radio, a Philips mantle radio that works, a national all-band transistor, which I remember from the early days at his place in Wellington Street, a 300-channel scanner by Realistic, and I put a memory battery in it and connected it up, and it's been going like a German band ever since. And I've got some handhelds, Yaesu and Bearcat Cobra scanner, and another small two-way radio. I think it's a CB UHF to go in the museum. They were all surplus to David's requirements. So that was good. It was good to see David again. I hadn't seen him for quite some time. And he's, 90-something now. I forget the exact date, but he's for a 90-year-old, he's doing well. Anyway, I won't hold it, Dave. I've got to have sorry, Chris and Peter and anyone else that can hear me. It's 25 past 11. I think I'd better head to the ablution block, Chris, and do the necessaries, and then it's been a pretty hectic day today, and hit the feathers, so to speak. So thanks again for a great program. I really, really enjoyed it. Keep up the good work. So VK3AML and the rest of the crew, I send my regards to Peter. This is VK3VJS. Cheers all.
Yeah, cheers, Jeff, and thanks for that. I must make a arrangement with you to do a visitation down there, possibly before Christmas if you have the time. Went through your area, obviously, on the way to Chelsea. You were in my mind at that stage. Interesting about Hawaii in 2006. I'm just opening up for start webcam, that's right. Trying to start a Zoom chat, and I'll go over to the secondary camera, which means I turn off this light. Gosh, it gets complicated. and I go to camera 2, camera 2 in the zoo, C930E, and there is the I'll have to, how do I do this now? I get hold of the screen from the point of view of the Zoom meeting, and I put in meeting ID 810 6092 2103, and Zoom passcode. This gets a little bit hairy. NK capital S G, and it looks like 60, or it might be 60. Oh God, how do we... So now we have a Zoom chat that presumably will start. If anybody cares to get in there. I haven't seen anybody so far. Well, who knows what will happen with that. And while we're waiting for that, I'll hand it back to... who will I hand it back to now? VK3HAG, if you're still there. I'd just forgotten your name. VK3HAG and group, VK3AML. Nope, I think we've lost 3HAG. We go back to Peter, VK3ACZ, VK3AML.
Just connecting with the Zoom meeting, so I'll put it by here, VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Okay, I'll see if I can get the audio working with this. Hello. Oh, Rolly's with us. I hope you can hear us, Rolly.
Yep, I can hear you okay.
Oh, good. How have you been? I mean, I've been off for a few weeks, as must be obvious. I'll just bring this up. That's a bit better.
Just a minute, I'll turn off the other side. There we go.
And I will be off for another 3 weeks or so, because next week we've got... and hello, Tom from Ballarat. I've been... kind of a bit tied up with arrangements for my wife's operation in January. And next week we've got social event. The week after is Christmas Eve. The week after is New Year's Eve. And I don't think it's very advisable to get that going.
That's the way it goes at this time of year, isn't it? It's I don't know. I leave all that sort of stuff to my wife, and she's very capable of looking after calendars and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. I just simply say, okay, what are we doing today?
Yeah. Did you know anybody associated with TAIT radio through the years, Rolly?
Oh yes, very very involved. Mm-hmm. In the early days, as a young man, I was very involved with TAIT. Doing a fair bit of service work on TAIT electronics. Mm-hmm. And then in later years, when I worked as a design engineer for Fisher & Paykel for many years. Uh-huh. And doing a lot of audio, the original audio stuff when the solid state first came out. In fact, Fisher & Paykel made the very first stereo that had a integrated circuit in it.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that was a preamplifier, a 4-stage preamplifier for the for magnetic cartridges that we used in those days.
Yes.
And and then the very first of the solid state televisions came out. There's a 12-inch portable, a 12-volt portable TV. And so we worked fairly closely with TAIT Electronics in those days, although we were fierce competitors from Fisher and Paykel.
Okay.
And then when Fisher and Paykel, they were making the Murphy and the AWA brand in those days. In fact, a radio or a stereo didn't know what on earth it was going to be until it got to right to the end of the production line, and it's about to go into a box, and they have a look up, how many Murphys have we made today? Oh, we need a few AWAs. So a badge AWA went on the outside of it, and it became an AWA rather than a Murphy.
Yeah. Are there any other major producers of transceiver equipment in New Zealand apart from TAIT?
No, not real. Pi.
Mm-hmm.
They were in Waihi, and they produced a few transceivers, VHF mainly.
Yeah.
But in later years, of course, after I left Fisher and Paykel, and I went. I was lecturing at Auckland University for a number of years, and then started up my own business. And one of the businesses I started up in those early days was I was the ICOM agent here in New Zealand for many years.
Ah, okay.
And now all of a sudden TAIT became a real problem to us because we're importing particularly marine radios and aeronautical radios, which had to pass type approval.
Right.
That's New Zealand type approval. And the likes of TAIT Electronics, they wanted to protect their market, of course, and they'd very strongly object. And so we had friendly but quite intense battles at times.
Yeah,
and,
what's the situation in New Zealand with tariffs and all that? Do they still impose a tariff as we used to in Australia on imported gear, or what?
No, not now. No, it's all gone now, and even type approval is gone now.
Oh.
With the injunction that if the equipment that you decide to import causes a problem, then you have to do a product recall, and you can be forced to by the authorities can tell you to cease and desist, and that can be a very, very expensive exercise, of course, that one. So make sure that what you're going to import and sell is going to come up to snuff anyways, would be the idea.
Yeah. So I suppose that's a feather in TAIT's cap to be able to compete with the Chinese product and still be competitive without any tariffs. Quite extraordinary.
Yeah, that was all Japanese in those days. But the TAIT story is a great one. But there's of course, all these documentaries have a very positive spin on them, and they're good on them too.
Yeah. There were a couple of others that I was going to run, but we ran out of time. One was on ICOM UK.
Well, they've been interesting. I know the ICOM UK guys very well indeed.
And another one is on Yaesu Fusion. I'm of one of the old sticklers that says I wait until there's some standardisation across the industry rather than diving into a proprietary software that may be outdated in 3 years' time and I do my money.
That's becoming more and more difficult nowadays, of course.
Quite a few different manufacturers with different systems, and even if I was enthusiastic to get involved with digital speech, I have about 4 different ways of going, and some of them have not too... They've split the market thereby, I think. Sure they have following, but the point I always make to friends who get into it is that amateur radio is not a telephone. It has the potential to be a lot more than that. In fact, at the moment with the radio over there, I'm transmitting with full bandwidth audio going into the NBFM modulator, and if anybody wants to, they can get about 8 kilohertz worth of audio out of my transmission if they care to do a tap off their discriminator.
Right.
And with the number of people who aren't on the band at this time of night on 2 metres, nobody's going to be worrying if I'm spreading a bit. So that all works out well.
Talking about band activity, I've been on 6 metres basically all day today, and the band has been wide open to the east coast of Australia and to VK2, 3s, 4s, down to VK7.
I remember ZL4LV. Peter, ZL4LV, when we visited there in 2019, he had a very high gain 6 metre beam permanently roped in position pointed at Australia.
Well, to be honest, all I was operating was off a straight ground plane.
Ah, okay.
And then all of a sudden, hello, here comes Japan, and we had a run of about 25, 30 Japanese just off.
Yeah.
In a period of about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. Then all of a sudden, boom, closed.
When it's open, it's open, basically.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. I mean, when it's open, yeah, you're right. You just can't go wrong, and all of a sudden it just stopped, and that was it.
Yeah.
But
Rolly,
even as we're speaking, sorry,
10 metres here has only just started to really open this week. The fellow up in the ionosphere there flicked the switch, and I've been hearing good reports about 6 metres as well. I haven't seen any myself, but that's a good effort. One thing I wanted to say to you, that you did a very good job on 40 doing a park-to-park with the VK2. It's 2 or 3 weeks ago now, but I heard you. And for the early afternoon on 40 metres, I was very surprised. You don't normally get ZLs on 40 that time of day. So you did very well.
Well, the reason is that because the ZLs don't bother to have a look around on 40 metres at that time of day. It's quite amazing, actually, the number of VKs I get from park to park on 40 metres during the middle of the day.
Yep.
It really is good. Then from my home QDH, I can receive them very well because I've got a ground loop antenna which virtually goes right around the whole property, and it's. I just had a look at it today. Well over 50% of it is below the leaf mould now. It's actually buried itself underground. And it absolutely works magnificent, that loop, so I can hear people, and that's the best thing. If you can hear them, you can normally work them. Just put a bit more coal, on the fire, and away you go.
Yeah, well, I don't usually hear VKs over 2,000 Ks until later in the afternoon. So I suppose 2 hours later, it was later in the afternoon for you. But anyway, it would have been nice if I could have worked you, but it wasn't your frequency. So I was just there sandbagging. It was good to hear anyway.
This is a lot of fun. In fact, as I'm looking right now, 12 metres is still wide open into Europe. There's Spain, Greece, Portugal.
I found
very good. I mean, good strong signals too.
Yep. Yesterday, 15 metres was still open at 1 a.m. our time, which so much for it being a daytime band. But 10 was when I packed up about an hour ago. 10 was still thumping in with Europe contacts. In fact, it's been pretty good since mid-afternoon here for Europe. JAs have been on all day, but that's nothing new.
The last Australian I worked with on 6 metres was VK1KW, and that was 10 o'clock my local time here, at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, excellent.
On 6 metres.
Yeah.
We're talking
Quick
sideband?
question for you.
No, that was FT8, Chris.
Ah, right, okay.
Oh, that's the dark side. Quick question for you.
I know.
Rolly, do you find that is there a maximum usable frequency for sporadic? In other words, like if 6 is open, if 10's open, 6 isn't always. But does it work the other way? Will 6 be open and 10's not, in your experience?
No, not really. Yes and no, and maybe, really. I mean, it's a real funny. That's why they call 6 metres the magic band, of course.
Yeah.
But no, I haven't found. I can't say categorically that 6 is open, therefore 10 and 12 and so on that will be open. No.
Okay. Yeah, just wondered. Thank you. Back to you, Chris.
No worries, no worries. And Tom, in Ballarat, anything local happen of recent times?
Oh, not really, Chris. We've just had our Christmas barbecue today. I'll pop the pictures up on Facebook. And then the final event for the year is this Friday at one of the bowling clubs for the major meal. We've got about 19 turning up for that, from what I gather, which is a good total. What I did want to catch up with you is Craig, VK3KG, has some 16mm footage, and he's wondering about how he goes about getting it transferred to video. And I thought, well, you'd be the man to know what the goings-on would and how he could probably go about it in a cheap way.
I have a lot of film that I probably need to transfer. Over the years, people knowing what I do professionally have thrown stuff at me, literally in boxes. This might interest you, and they hand me a box of 16mm film. A couple of the things that came my way were the remnant of the Victorian Amateur Cine Society's collection, and some of that is 16mm of incredibly high standard. Some of it goes back to 1936, and they were among the first adopters of colour. Kodachrome and Dufay colour were available for amateur work long before the professionals with Technicolor and all the rest of it. So their colour coverage is in many cases the first colour coverage of different places that they went into. The other collection I've got here... I'm
not sure what the subject is of the film he's got, but it was quite a while ago that he mentioned it to me. But I must get back to him.
I haven't actually set up for... I've got 16mm projectors, and I have cameras capable of 4K, and surely there'll be some way of me getting that done. I know that Dave, who does Shortwave Australia on 4835, Dave 3ASC, has done a lot of his family's stuff to video, and a lot of his family stuff is on 9.5mm gauge, that very funny early gauge with the holes down the middle in the frame line between the images. And you can imagine it's a perfectly brilliant way of doing things until the cog slips. And then the claw goes straight into the image area.
Oh, no.
But fortunately, most people were fairly careful with their film. But he's done that to video with a camera that, of course, has a fixed scan rate, and he has a variac on the projector. So he varies incrementally the speed of the projector so that if there is a flicker rate, it's very slow, and the camera can follow it in with automatic exposure. So there are some tricks that you can do with that.
What I was surprised about was both those clips you had today, the quality. Admittedly, the first one had been restored, but was the second one restored, or is that as original?
As I believe Tom Hogan got that scanned in high def, like not exceptionally high def. Some of them are 720p and some 1080, but 1080's almost low definition by modern standards.
You look at that, and it's beautiful grayscale and everything else. It really does stand out.
I did have to do some corrections. He's put them up to the internet without taking out the colour information, so hypo stains were showing on the original. So I selected the colour primary that was transparent to the hypo stain. And also, it being direct reversal film, if they got the exposure a little wrong, it stayed wrong on the print. But now you can fiddle what they call the gamma control. And that can actually do a little bit of correcting. There are limits to it, but what you saw was, on a few occasions, majorly corrected for incorrect exposure. That brings up the grain a bit, but it does make some things visible on the screen that weren't previously. But every year, new techniques come along. It's getting better and better.
Well, that first clip there, and and I liked it. The very subtle colorization was brilliant. It didn't sort of. You still saw the fact that it was originally a black and white film.
Yeah.
But just that little hint of pastel colours certainly made it.
Well, that's all the work of ACMI, and they have access to a much higher budget than I do. And I've been out of it for a good 10 years now, so I'll have to perhaps go into ACMI in the city in Federation Square and just literally ask the guy face to face, how do you do this? In fact, that might be an interesting in for a video segment on a future Saturday night, if they allow me to do it.
The other thing... The other thing is, I don't know if you can see that or not. There we go. Right, and I'll turn it over.
Yeah. Mullard.
It's going to be... Yeah, right.
It's a valve box.
Well, it's a valve box, but it's got a diode in it.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that's how small it is. It folds up like a bit bigger than a... Where are we? A bit bigger than a cigarette paper box.
And we're going back 70 years by the looks of it.
Well, my boss bought a stack of Defence Department stuff about 12 months ago because there were 2 bits of gear in there that were going at a really, really good price if you bought the lot. And hiding in it was a pack of half a dozen of these.
Yeah.
And they're that old, the masking tape is started to crumple. Now this is a CV44-2. I put it up on Facebook, and I finally got given Mr. Transistor in the UK. And it seems if it's in this box, this would be possibly a prototype that they made for the Defence Department. Because later on, GE and everybody else made them, but they had the part number printed on the body of the diode.
Right.
Now this doesn't. This is just a glass diode with a yellow band for the red band. See the red yellow.
Okay. Is it silicon or germanium? Do you know?
No, it's point contact, I think.
So it's germanium.
Glass. You can see into it. It's germanium. Yeah.
Rather like an OA91.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what its full provenance is, but yeah, it's come from the Defence Department stock, so it's new old stock. How's that?
New old stock from 1952 or something.
Probably, yeah. So anyhow, I caught up with Mr. Transistor, and I'm sending him this one that's open, and I'm sending him one that's still fully closed, because he hasn't got one with a colour band. All the ones he's got have got part numbers written on them.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, and this is a story for caution. When I was working in the museum as assistant curator of electronics, this is going back to 84, a chap died who had the stock of a bankrupt radio store that had been stored away since 1932.
Oh.
And the stuff was in its original packaging.
Yeah.
There was a Jensen speaker in there and in its original box. So I decided to be a bit naughty and unseal it. There were 3 of them anyway. So I pick it up, and the natural thing is you put it on your lap.
Yep.
And I unsealed it, and about 20 cockroaches ran into my pants. I then, there being no women around, I whipped my pants off and started jumping up and down on it when the boss walked in. It was the most embarrassing day that I had at the museum. So from then on, the stuff was fumigated at the very least, and possibly sent to Lucas Heights to be irradiated before being examined, to make sure everything was dead.
Well, Craig happened to be in the way of a deceased estate up country, and the guy was a serviceman, as in a TV serviceman. Craig happened to get in the way before they went to landfill. All the service manuals he had for the televisions of the day, and he also happened to didn't think at all, got some of them, and they were a newsletter that Astor Electrical used to send out. There we go, somewhere there, focused, called Tech Talk.
Yep.
And these are dating from 1965.
Yeah.
And it covers everything. The Tech Talks are like the updates and the mods and everything else for the service guys to read.
Right.
But they also brought out a newsletter every month.
Oh.
Which is... This is
AWA, is it?
No, this is Asta.
Asta, okay. I didn't realise they did.
And this is the Asta News. I'm trying to see where it is. Camera won't look at it.
Asta used to be down somewhere near Hughesdale or somewhere out that way.
And it's surprising. It covers everything from when they were making mattresses to getting stuff for Malvern Star, even the record reviews on the back, all the latest 45s. Because
they used to press records down there. I actually did a tour of their pressing plant about 1972.
Yeah, well, my aunt used to work there with amongst all the ladies putting the records in the sleeves.
Ah, okay.
I think she worked there for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've got all that. There is actually a Facebook site for it.
Right.
And I've caught up with the guys there, and they're quite happy for me to send some scan stuff through.
If it's of any interest to them, I have a very old Vocalion private recording of a 3-minute-long advert for Astor radios dating from 1931, which is almost their launch date, I think.
Yep. Recorded
with a Marconi Reese microphone with the usual odd distortions those things have.
Yeah. This actually is quite a... Oh, come on, focus. This one, it's their Astor Mini Portable Model P8021 portable transistor radio.
All right. 1965, that was fairly expensive
1965, 2 7/8 inches by 1 5/16 by 4 1/8 inch in size, and 7 ounces including battery.
Yeah.
Uses a 216 9-volt battery. Audio output a full 100, and they've got capital MW.
Well, the speakers at least were more efficient in those days.
But it includes the circuit diagrams, layouts, and everything else for the service guys, so they don't have to go looking.
Yeah.
And then things like Asta deflection yokes and equivalencies, a whole stack of stuff. I've got about a handful of it there to pop in, but it's interesting from that date as to what was available and how they were doing it.
Yeah.
Even bringing recording stars over because they were represented through Asta and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm slowly going through it at the moment.
When I went through their pressing plant, there were would have been about 8 or maybe 10 presses all going, and I visited there at night, so they obviously worked 24 hours. And one of the guys realised we were from an audio organisation that was going through there, and I think theatrically he pulled the stamper out of his machine. He went over to a sink, cleaned it with a scrubbing brush, and made moves to put it back into the press before we left. And I think what he was doing was probably with a rejected stamper, just for theatrical effect, to give a shock to these people coming in.
That's how they did it all.
Fascinating process, though. I saw the mastering room, and they had a tape delay line, a magnetic tape delay line that allowed them to have the variable pitch cutting for increasing the playing time on the disc. That particularly impressed me. And of course the tape would delay the audio by exactly 1 groove rotation length.
Right, yep.
And that would allow them to command the speed of the cutting head across the record to get the full 25 minutes or whatever it was, or used to be per side.
And it would have been all done with analogue.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That's
problem.
Who would have thought at that stage that recorders would be available to be of far higher quality with no moving parts at all?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Your mobile phone's a classic example, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I'll have to pop up to Ballarat fairly soon, but with Prue in her present condition, we're now looking at the 6th of January for an operation, so I'm a bit housebound. That's one of the reasons I do this every Saturday night. There are a lot of people who were housebound during COVID, and now I seem to have built up some sort of a following.
No, that's fine, mate. It's good to look forward to. We missed you the couple of nights you weren't on, but of course understood the situation.
Well, for the next 3 weeks, it's a bit difficult.
I hope you had a good night. I hope you did have a good night out the night you did go out.
Yeah. That which I can remember of it, yes. Oh, dear.
No worries, mate. But if you do come down, you come Thursday.
Yeah. The club's open Thursday,
that's our coffee morning.
Well,
no, that's our coffee morning.
Okay.
Coffee morning we have it's in town rather than at the club rooms.
Right.
It's just up the road from the railway station.
Oh.
And
in
we have
Ledyard Street?
Usually between, well, it's Doveton Street, so it's a couple across.
Right.
In Doveton Street North. And we usually have somewhere between 9 and 12 people, locals come in. Those of us that don't work, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So more mature age, so to speak.
Yep.
I just tell my boss I've got to have Thursday morning off for my social coffee. Yeah. So he's happy with that. Yeah.
Well, sounds like Thursday's the go for you, and Friday nights for the observatory at Magpie Street. That's their open day. Or at least it
they're
used
starting
to
to open again. Yeah, they're starting to open again now. The weather's coming good. The night of the lunar eclipse, they were there, and also up on the Sovereign Hill. There's a car parking area and a ridge up there, and Peter 3PWG, who works as a part-timer there, was up there with one of the other locals, and they had I think he had an 8-inch reflecting telescope he brought up there with him, and they spent time looking at Jupiter before the lunar started, and it was beautiful weather for a change.
Yeah.
For the whole night there, usually we come out and it's overcast, so that's it. Go to bed.
At that QRP, by the way, I was really surprised that somebody bought a fully functioning radio telescope. What does it say? 10 minutes we've got. And
I was surprised at
it
that
says
too,
upgrade, and I can't find a way of... I can't... Oh, there's the X. Good, got rid of it. Okay, you've got 10 minutes. What a nuisance this thing is. We'll have to find a better platform. But the trouble is nobody else knows how to use the other platforms.
Hello, there we go. We got a picture.
There's Terry. You got no audio, Terry?
No sound? Yeah, you're muted, mate.
Maybe he's done it purposely. I'm looking right up your nose, Terry.
Nose.
I hope you've blown it recently. He's giving us a demo. Who would have thought that ham radio had come to this? I mean, we do live in wonderful times. The fact that we can integrate this sort of thing with ham radio. And
you're muted, mate. We can see you've got your mute on.
Yeah. Look down the bottom.
Is that better?
That's it. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Good.
Yeah.
I need to shave. Look like a caveman.
Yeah, I know. First time I've seen you with a bare face.
Yeah, no, like a caveman, mate.
Okay.
Yeah, no, all good.
Good.
All good. Yeah, I just found my camera. I've got the room pulled apart.
Yeah, Terry's been having a lot of bad luck. His antenna keeps blowing down. Of course, we've had rotten weather in Melbourne for the last month or so. Alternating with good days and incredibly bad days. It's impossible to predict from one day to the next.
If the antenna keeps coming down, it's all that proves is that you got it at the right height.
Well, that's it, mate. It's sitting at 12 metres, so it's up fairly high.
12 metres.
Yeah.
If your antenna doesn't come down, you haven't got it up high enough.
Well, that's it. That's what I reckon.
Mine, I have to get somebody younger than myself to go up there and fix it up, because over the last 5 years, it has slid down 10 centimetres to the point where the active part of the antenna is is actually parallel with the metal part of the pole, so it's probably detuning it a little bit, particularly for 70 centimetres. I don't use 70 centimetres all that much, but getting through to the network to repeaters that go out to Mount William and everything, I probably should get that fixed up. I'll go back to Rolly while we've still got him here, because we can only get him on Zoom. Anything to report of what's going on in New Zealand, Rolly?
Oh, not a lot. No, I don't get out and about all that much, but there's a lot of activity over this way nowadays with parks on the air, and that seems to be doing very well here in New Zealand at the moment. A lot of people are getting out and having great success, and particularly across the Tasman, and a lot of guys over the Tasman there are very interested in either the VKFF or the worldwide fauna and flora, is it? Parks or the POTA parks on the air, and all of a sudden the guys are taking quite a keen interest in that here in New Zealand.
I know what you mean by detritus falling over your earthing system, particularly in Auckland, because the subtropical weather you've got there, like Sydney. My friend Mike 7MJ and I, while we were in Auckland about 5 years ago, went up the hill from Queen Street to an old cemetery. I forget the name of it. But it was like going into an Aztec ruin with trees like Moreton Bay fig, or something related to it, actually growing over the tombstones. It was incredible.
It's probably Myers Park, would it?
I'm not sure. It's fairly jungle-like, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's fairly well tidied up now. It's no longer jungle-like.
A pioneer cemetery, I think. A lot of the graves went back to the 1860s, I recall.
I know where it is. Yeah. So, guys are quite interested in parks, and the younger guys are quite interested in climbing up and doing summits on the air. So that's been quite interesting from my point of view, and like to chase them around a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Do they get out to the outer islands, like outer? What is it? Outer. What's that island? The big one out to the east of Auckland.
Chatham.
Outer Barrier Island.
Great Barrier Island,
Barrier,
Little Barrier Island, Motohi Island,
Are there many people out there?
Island. There's a couple of guys. Actually, there's one amateur that's on Waiheke Island. That's out just out in the Gulf there, and there's a couple of guys up in Great Barrier. There's quite a few. Few of the islands are activated.
Yeah.
I think there's a permanent guy on Chatham Islands now.
Oh, okay.
And
an incredibly remote and expensive place to access.
Yeah, of course, as we discussed previously, Kermadec and Auckland, Kermadec to the north and Auckland Islands to the south, they're off limits now.
Well, Kermadec as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't have thought that it was quite as sensitive as the subantarctic, but anyway.
Oh, it is now. Well, it is now in that there's nobody on the Kermadec Islands. Used to be a weather station there, and 4 guys would be there on a 2-year stint, and making hooch out of the local oranges.
Oh,
it's good stuff too. But the weather station now has been fully automated there, so there's nobody on the islands. The DOC or Department of Conservation guys have been up there and de-ratted the whole island so that it's rat-free now and pest-free. And so
four-legged or two-legged?
Yeah, you're right. So that's all been locked up now as a conservation island for the bird life. Yeah.
Right. I can understand that. I remember at Stewart Island they're doing a lot of, Ulva off Stewart. They're doing a lot of work on keeping the rats down there, and the impact on Stewart Island itself, rats, deer particularly, on subantarctic fleshy sort of plants that grow very slowly apparently has been devastating. Not to mention the kakapo.
Yeah, those are rascals. Yeah, the deer have been particularly bad down at Stewart Island. That's for sure.
Well, does anybody have any final comments? Perhaps Peter, who's got his homework there.
I've been rewriting my log for the DX contest today. One new country, Kazakhstan.
Oh, the famous Borat sent it up. His sister is the third best prostitute in Kazakhstan. And she has the cup to prove it in the film. Oh dear. What's with the VK3RDU on yours, Terry? I'm just looking at your screen there.
Oh, just one of the repeaters. It's in there. That's all.
Right.
It's just stopped basically. If I hit that and then hit that.
We got a new repeater, 3RKM, the other day that the Moorabbin District Radio Club's put up.
Oh, okay. I'll have to get some details.
147.075, 91.5 hertz subtone.
That's all me C frequencies at the bottom.
Yep.
So you can see CB and everything else coming up through there, but
you're showing off.
The top one's 270.
Right.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris, that's all we need, another repeater when the many we've got hardly get it.
Well, yeah, I think the Moorabbin guys wanted one just for the locality, and it's not tremendously strong here, but I'm in the eastern suburbs and should get it pretty well. It's in test phase, as I understand, and they're going to eventually put it on the Moorabbin Town Hall. So then they can talk us into the Moorabbin Hamfest where we can't see what we're buying because the lighting is so poor. Oh, it's gone. Okay. So we go back to radio. Oh dear. I'll go back to the webcam and let me see. We go back to the Brio. Okay. And I turn off the filter for sharpening because it makes it all jangly. Close. And we switch on frontal light like that. And we're back in business. So just concluding, is anybody still with us on 2 metres? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima listening.
Yeah, VK3ACZ is.
That was a good session.
It was. It's always good to catch up with Rolly, and I spoke with Terry this afternoon on RMM, speaking of repeaters, so he was out and about on VHF. Good to see him in person as well. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Yeah, I've only seen Terry, although we speak almost on a daily basis, either on text or on radio, I've only seen Terry about half a dozen times, and I think we met once face-to-face at a Hamfest some years ago now. But I guess we better start wrapping up. At least tonight I've had no technical problems. I mean, with the Zoom and the OBS software changing and the webcams being reconfigured for different things, there are so many places. You're looking at a long tunnel of nasty possibilities. So I always feel very relieved and very happy when it all goes well. VK3ACZ. Touch wood, quick. VK3AML.
Yeah. Well, what I'll be looking forward to doing now is going and watching the whole test transmission from the, well, I suppose you can call it a broadcast on YouTube. It's obviously a test transmission on 147.475, but not to worry. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing that. Oh, it's been a busy day. I'm so tired and worn out from sitting in the sun or trying to shade myself under a little Cancer Council umbrella that it was better than nothing, but not as good as being inside a shack. But, would you believe two new radios, well, not new radios, new to me radios followed me home today from Gary GLC's place, an ICOM 706 Mark II-G and an Yaesu 817, another QRP radio. No demonstrable need for them, just had the desire to have them follow me home, and so I did. So I suppose I can go in and familiarise myself with those two new radios as well. I had to pretty much drop them off and head for the hills to work this DX contest today. And I'll just say for the third time today, what a pity that HF only comes alive for contests. I guess it's a bit like having so many repeaters. Not a lot of them are getting used extensively, and more the pity. I recall when I was a kid, we had 4 repeaters in Melbourne, all 2 metres, and of course the idea of anybody getting onto 70 centimetres, well, that was just too advanced for the likes of us mere mortals. But anyway, hey, it's been another pleasant evening, Chris. I'm going to especially enjoy reminiscing about last week's QRP by the Bay contest. And lastly, a question for you, as well as sending my best wishes and make this a final. You were hinting something about you might be having a break over Christmas. Please do let me know what's happening there. But anyway, thank you again. 7-3, good night, and good night to all. Look forward to the next one. VK3AML, VK3ACZ.
Okay, any other breakers before we go? VK3AML just taking a final standby. No, that's it. Okay, well, next week Prue and I have a social situation, so we can't do next Saturday. The Saturday after will be Christmas Eve, and highly unlikely anybody will be in a position to get involved with this Saturday session then. And the Saturday after that will be New Year's Eve. So as I see it, my best bet is to come back on the 7th of January, for the first session of the new year. And I hope to be doing something in the way of video that I take of ham radio events over the Christmas season in the interim, but also trying to get permission to do something on Over the Horizon radar, but it's very much dependent on whether the scientists that I've contacted are willing to be involved. They may have requirements dictated by military involvement that stop me from doing it, in which case I find another subject. Anyway, people, I'll just check the text chat. VK3WL, nice to see you there. Mark Sierra, John Young, The Cuckoo has closed. Yes, the Cuckoo restaurant, at the time that video was prepared, was operating, but I think it's not survived COVID, unfortunately. So many of those catering businesses really went through a hard time as a result of the COVID lockdowns. And Tom George, yes, it was colourised, but very subtly done. It almost sufficiently subtly that you could switch off your saturation and watch it in black and white if you so desired. I tried that and decided that colourising was probably the lesser of two evils. So with that, I think that's about it. I shall now stop streaming and close on 2 metres. This is VK3AML with a regular Saturday night session, which we run 9:30 p.m. as many Saturdays as I can manage without destroying my social life. And we'll be back on the 7th of January 2023 with our next. So thank you, people. I'll now stop streaming. All the best until next year. A very Merry Christmas and a bright and prosperous New Year to you all. Thank you for your interest.